Welcome back. Thought you might return. Joe Root is being the main discussion player. I nearly said he was on the show there for a minute. We've got pretty much the next best thing with two of his best friends, and also his predecessor as England captain. Michael Vaughan rejoins us. We're celebrating not only Joe Root's success, England's success, but also Sheffield Collegiate success, hence the current captain of Sheffield Collegiate, with a bit of a hard act to follow. Josh Varley rejoins us as well. And James Gregg with some topical news around the area. Just kick us off, Josh, in this part of the show, because we were talking off air about how soon in your relationship as pals playing together that you spotted the captain in Joe Root.
I think it was a time when we'd go down to the nets, you know, when school finished and it was a 6-week holiday, we'd all be going down and you'd talk about how you were netting and it'd be different things such as how he thought about the game. That's always how I've noticed the difference in him to anybody else. And, you know, there'd be a few of us going in there and when you're out, you're out. You've got a bowl for a bit, and that's a long time when you're netting with like the likes of Joe. But it was how he thought about the game from such a young age, how he figured things out. I mean, Vaughan mentioned earlier about how he used to get 35 not out for the second team when he was really young, and how he had a game plan, and it was his whole plan in his mind. It was way above his time in terms of how he thought about the game. Whenever he came back as a young lad to play for Collegiate, when the Yorkshire Academy they didn't have a game or it'd be a cup game, he'd captain, and you could just tell he was streaks above anything we were around in our league, and his thought process. And I think that really has set him above from such a young age.
Did you spot similar at an early age, Michael?
Yeah, you know, I wouldn't have said when he first came to Yorkshire that, and also being around him when he was a kid at Collegiate, I didn't see leadership qualities then. But when England was starting to look for a new captain, I was one of the few that said Joe's an absolute perfect foil for the job, because he won't be quite ready yet, but he'll in time become a fantastic leader. I guess the biggest doubt around Joe and the captaincy was his runs, because he was such an important player for England. There were many pundits saying, "Oh, you don't want to take away the runs," and also he's a cheeky chappy. He'll have to become serious, and you know, do you want Joe Root to be the serious player in the dressing room? He's better off being this cheeky chappy. But I used to say, well, wait a minute, he's maturing and he leads by example. All captains have to lead by example on the training zone. And because international cricket, there's so much planning goes into every single game, your leader has to be on that training ground doing the right things. And at the time that he got the job, England needed that kind of style of leader. Alistair had done a good job for England, and he was the perfect foil to take on what Alistair had done. I do think the first year and a half was hard for him, because you look back to 2016, 17, 18, 19 in English cricket, it was all about winning the World Cup. Everything and every egg was put into winning the World Cup and that white ball team, and it worked brilliantly. But by doing that, I felt sorry for Joe, because I really felt that the test team was an afterthought. It was like, oh, there's a test match. Joe, good luck, you go and manage the test match team. There wasn't a clear plan. And since that Ashes in 2019 and Chris Silverwood getting the job, I really believe, and that's what excites me about the test team, you can see there's a clear plan of the way that they want to play, the style of play that they want, the style of cricket that they want to play to try and beat the best teams, not just the second string teams in international cricket, but the best teams, the Indians, the Australians. And that's Joe and Chris's partnership. I mean, the captains, we all get a huge amount of praise and credit, but you're only as good as your bowling attack and your team and your management. You know, no captain can go out there and do remarkable things without a huge amount of support around you. And it always makes me laugh when people say to me, "Oh, 05, your captaincy, your leadership." Utter nonsense if I had not had Flintoff, Steve Armisen, Matthew Hoggard, Simon Jones and Ashley Giles. To win test match cricket, you need 20 wickets. And you can be the best captain in the world. If you don't have those bowlers that can create those chances and get those wickets, it's irrelevant. So Joe's doing brilliantly, and it's because this plan is now in place for the test team to go and beat the best teams in the world.
Well, he's now averaging over 50 in tests with the bat as well, having sort of drifted below that. You talk about the bowlers, none more remarkable than Jimmy Anderson at 38, with now, I think, 343 Test wickets in his 30s. That is utterly incredible. Explain that one.
He's a freak. He's an absolute freak. I mean, I loved his interview yesterday. He said, I'm 38. Why can't I get better? And he's absolutely right. I think, I look at Joe, Jimmy Anderson, Stuart Broad, Ben Stokes, Josh Butler, and what they're thriving to do is get better all the time. And it's a great lesson to all players that it doesn't matter what you've achieved. Joe's now averaging over 50 in Test match cricket. I reckon in the back of his mind, he's thinking, I can get better. I can get to 55 in terms of an average by the time I've finished, or maybe 60. Jimmy Anderson's thinking, why can't I play for a couple more years and get another 100 Test match wickets? You look at Stuart Broad, the skill levels that he's producing now to what he didn't have 3 or 4 years ago, the cutters, the slow balls, the different variations. And again, it's just a lesson to all players. I mean, you can coach as much as you want, but if the individual doesn't want to get up every morning to try and thrive to get better in their own mind, it's very difficult for a coach to improve a play. It really is down to that individual person. And that's what excites me about English cricket, is that the role models in our game now are great role models for kids, that they are on television basically every day saying, yeah, but I can get better. I can keep getting better. So even though Joe, and the guys know Joe more than I do, but even though he's had a couple of doubles in the last few weeks, in his room, he'll be watching something in his game that he can improve upon. It might be a technical aspect. It might be a new shot. It might be an angle that he can produce to cause the opposing captain a few more problems. And that's what makes him a great player. I mean, when you're starting to get talked about in the same breath as Viv Richards, so in 182 Test innings, the same as Viv Richards, Joe is now averaging, I think, 0.5 more than the great Viv Richards. They both got 69 half centuries. Viv Richards in that time has got 24 hundreds. Joe's got 20 hundreds. But Joe averages more than Viv Richards. When you're getting tough, the only thing he needs now is the big arse, the swagger and the cap, and he's Viv Richards.
James, I'm going to bring you, we're going to talk about social media in a minute. And I want to ask Michael about his role in this, but I'm going to bring James in on as well. The fact that we're now on terrestrial again is just going to increase this swirl of opinion. I don't know if you've noticed that over the previous few days. It's wonderful that everybody now has access to England Test cricket, and you revel in social media. It's something you ride with and seem to enjoy. Even the sort of less savoury parts of it. Do you think that's going to explode as well, even more? Yeah,
I think so. And I think you've got to accept it if you're on it. Accept that not all of it's going to be rosy for you. I look at it, I obviously tweet things, but there are times when I don't look at the comments because I know they're going to be quite brutal. So I always say to any sports person that's on social media, if you're going to be on it, don't take the good times with a nice glowing clap and then criticize social media when it gets nasty. What we're going through is a strange time in our lives where, we have an individual can be anybody. And that's the one thing that really winds me up about social media. I love it. I think it's a great tool for everybody, and particularly the supporters. But when I could be 10 different accounts, of which one is me and then 9 are completely made up, and I could tweet anything to anybody as 1, 2, 3, 4, 8, 7. I just think that's out of order. I think if you're on social media, you should be verified. So at least I know who's abusing me. It's quite nice when you know that they're abusing you. Go, it's Jim from Sheffield, not a problem. But if it's 1, 2, 8, 5, 6, 7, you've no idea who it is. Yeah, that's when it's becoming frustrating. But it's great. I think the sports people that use it correctly and in the right way, and you're interacting with fans, it's brilliant. And that's the way you should use social media. And also understand if you are going to be on it, and let's be honest, a lot of sports people are on social media because of the commercial gains. Don't necessarily criticize it when it goes bad, when you're making a living out of it sometimes on your commercial gains. So I love it. I interact. I think it's great that the fan can have its say. That's why I guess the debate about the declaration gets more exposure because of social media. The fact Joe now has been mentioned, with Viv Richard. That came through social media. I didn't have a clue about that until someone from India tweeted. I had to check it, to be honest. I was like, that can't be right. I've got to check that. But I think it's a great tool. You know, Sheffield Collegiate, I tweeted something about the 52 test victories for Sheffield Collegiate, and it had like 11,000 likes. You know, many Indians, but it's just great to be able to send a message out that people necessarily wouldn't have had a clue that Sheffield Collegiate was where Joe Root came from, where I came from. And I hope Sheffield Collegiate gets a little bit of a more following, and people start to dig into the great work that's done down at Aberdale Park. And hopefully we can, you know, it's all about inspiring the next generation. But, you know, I really do think the blueprint of how a cricket club is run is the way that Sheffield Collegiate has run the club over the last 30 years.
Yeah,
you look at somebody like Jimmy Neesham
on social media. James Gregg, you're very active on it as well. You've got a point to make, I think.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, Michael, you know, somebody who's having a swig of his milkshake there is Michael. Love it. I was going to say, you know, somebody like Jimmy Neesham who interacts and has fun. We saw him after the World Cup final, which I thought was incredibly brave when obviously he was part of that super over loss. And he tweeted, I think, a couple of hours after the final, basically saying, you know, parents, don't get your kids into sport. It's rubbish. And I thought that was quite, you know, it's quite amusing. You know, he has a bit of fun with it. But look, you know, I love how fearless you are, Michael, with the, you know, the punditry, basically, because you're saying, doing exactly what you're kind of being paid to do, give your opinion. There was a lot of people having a little nibble yesterday, wasn't there? You know, but you're not afraid to say things that perhaps, you know, in the dressing room might not go down too well. But does that come from you having been there and experienced that and heard people, commentators, seen things in the press, and then actually knowing that the second that you retire, you probably start having a bit of an appreciation for the job that pundits have to do?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I would say in the dressing room, I'd have been exactly the same. You know, I think being a captain, Josh will know the same. You know, you've got to be honest in the dressing room. You can't blow smoke up everyone's arses all the time, and you have to be upfront and honest to individuals. I guess then, as a captain of England, you then have to protect, you know, the team in the media. You have to talk very fondly of everything. When you've kind of the shackles are off when you finish and you go into punditry, you have to say what you see. You know, and if you see something that's not quite right, you've got to say it. You know, it's, as long as you've got a reason why. You know, as I say, I think that the declaration and the debate around that, all I'd say, it was cautious. And I think everyone would agree it was a cautious declaration. But England won the game, so I have no problem with that at all. It's the fields that got set on that fourth evening that I know there's a lot that's great about the modern game. And, you know, we work with, you know, someone like Alistair Cook comes into the media over the last year or so, and he sees it from our side of the fence now. And you can see that he gets frustrated. He's like, why haven't they got the... I said, well, you were captain. You wouldn't have had one. You recently were the captain. We were the same to you. So it's very interesting that once a player retired and then comes and sits, you know, the one thing I always say that, and I wish I'd have had more of it when I was England captain, I wished I'd have used people at the ground more, because you've got to remember when you're a player that you're emotionally attached to that group and those players and that management and every decision. Whereas we're not emotionally attached to the group. We want England to win, but we're actually not. We're just seeing it as we see it. And, you know, we're saying whatever we see and we're going, yeah, wait a minute. And sometimes you actually should take that on board, because you're almost taking the emotional side out of it and kind of seeing it from, it's like two fences in. If you can get in the middle of it, it's possibly about right. Because, of course, in the media, now and again, you have to say things that I personally, at the minute, I'll be completely honest, I try and wind up India. It makes me chuckle. You know, on an evening, I'm bored, I'm in lockdown, I've got nothing else to do. I've been in my house pretty much for 10 months. I'll sit around the TV and I'll go... I put a video out there last night about some kid cycling on some water, and then, I don't know if you've seen it, and then all of a sudden he didn't realise and he just goes straight into this pond. And I just thought, I'll have to put it out. It's like India's batting at the end, you know. And all of a sudden, you get all these responses, and I'm sat watching Man United on my television. I'm just chuckling to myself. I have to try and entertain myself. And one way of doing so is it's not having a dig at India, but you know they're so passionate and they're so powerful, and you can't ever criticise anything that they do. It does make me chuckle.
Yeah. Well, yeah. James. other things. I mean, we're going to come back. Oh, but before we come to James, Josh, at Michael's tweet about Sheffield Collegiate, 11,000 likes. How important for Collegiate, the future of the club, in, what are really hard times for sporting organisations, not least at grassroots level where you've been inactive for so long. Just how important the association with two former England captains and the number one umpire, how important is that for you as a cricket club?
I think as a cricket club, I think it's enormous. I think that the things what come through social media, I mean, like Varley mentioned about that tweet, I mean, the club Twitter account, the notifications were just, I mean, there's a few people who've got it on the phones. There was about 10 notifications a minute, and that's, you go from getting 10 notifications all winter, and then you get this thing coming through. But the whole recognition around, almost every club now, especially the Premier League clubs and the big clubs who have large members, the social media is a big part of it. It's where you put your news, and having guys like Joe and Michael around who push it, who sort of tweet this is massive. You have a big following, and it really does help out, and from all aspects.
Yeah, well, we look forward to cricket being back there. We look forward to football crowds being back. There's a bit of news on the football front. Obviously, both the Owls and the Blades are playing, James. But there's something that should have happened years ago in the background as well, I think.
There is, yeah. And also, just to mark your card on sort of non-league football, because I know that you and I and many others who watch this programme were absolutely reveling the fact that we could go to non-league football when we weren't allowed in the Premier League grounds. And there is potentially a little sliver of hope there, because I've noticed that Scotland are on about bringing non-league football back in the coming weeks. So potentially we could be having a pint up at Sandygate at some point soon, Alan, you and I. But we'll just keep our cards close to our chest on that one. Yeah, what you're alluding to is something that we've talked about for ages. I'm sure actually Josh and Michael will agree with this, is that we don't bang the drum enough in Sheffield about the fact it is the home of football. And it's where the Sheffield rules originated. We just mentioned Sandygate. It's the oldest football ground in the world. Bramall Lane is the oldest professional football ground in the world, which is still in use. The Sheffield Home of Football campaign, that's teamed up with Sheffield Libraries. And it sounds a little bit boring, but stick with it. The Sheffield and Hallamshire FA, they're going to all sort of try and amalgamate and try and create what it could be basically a Sheffield Football Museum, hopefully opening up in the summer. At the moment, the National Football Museum's in Manchester. Yeah, I know they've got two big sides, but why is that? And I love this quote as well. We can all get on board with this. It's from John Wilson from the campaign. And he was in the Sheffield Star talking about it. And he said, it's fantastic. It won't be quite like Barcelona's trophy cabinet. He's not kidding. But he says that Barcelona doesn't have what Sheffield has. And I bet that Barcelona would love to have what Sheffield has. And I kind of agree with him a little bit. So that could be really exciting. And I think it's a bit long overdue, to be honest.
Yeah. What say you, Michael, on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Now I live in Cheshire now, and I've done for many years. And they're not shy with this side of the Pennines of banging the drum about anything. So you would think that Manchester's the only place that plays football. I think Sheffield, Yorkshire as a whole, I mean, it gets a bit of a reputation for being a bit grim and, a bit dull up north and around the Yorkshire parts. But Sheffield should bang the drum more about its sporting prowess. You only have to look at, I mean, the musical prowess is exceptional, but you only have to look at what Sheffield has produced over the years in terms of sports people, sports teams. The football, Sheffield United, I hate to say it, even though the bottom of the league and have struggled this year, have punched massively above anything over the last 4 or 5 years with Chris Wilder in charge. Yorkshire and Sheffield, they need to bang the drum a bit louder. Don't be so quiet. Start talking about what's great about the city, what's great about the sport. If I was Sheffield Collegiate now, I would be waxing lyrical and using the Joe Root 26 wins, my 26 wins. Joe's the best player of spin that we've had. He's been born and bred and produced at Aberdale Park. Wax lyrical about what we've done and what we're producing, and the next conveyor belt of young players that are coming through. I know that there will be another player that comes from Sheffield Collegiate. There has to be. There's too many young kids that are playing there, and there will be another player, whether it's a girl or a boy, that will come through, represent Yorkshire, and will represent England, because that foundation has been set in place for many, many years.
Fantastic facilities, and no better place either for spectators.
Lovely bar.
cricket, yeah, in the summer months. James, both the Owls and Blades are in action over the course of the weekend. We've got to be honest, we're recording this, so we don't know if Sheffield United are in the quarterfinal of the FA Cup or not. We hope they are by the time you watch this. And I'm seeing hope at Hillsborough. I'm looking at the team rather than the politics, Michael, and I was there this week. All right, they beat the bottom team, Wycombe, but it was a very comprehensive and professional performance. And you sense that the coach, the interim manager, knows what he's doing.
Yeah, I mentioned to you off air that Sheffield Wednesday in the last 5 years seem to have the best times when we don't have a manager. An interim comes in. Maybe that's the new cool. Maybe that's the new kind of mechanism for success, that all these players are kept on the toes because they're not too sure who may come in. If the manager comes in, they might not be required. But in the kind of aftermath, and I'm only reading a lot of the stuff what's going on at Sheffield Wednesday, but it doesn't seem to be a club that's run brilliantly. So for the interim manager to come in and do what he's done, full credit to those players. I know that wages have been not paid on time a few times this season. For them to be professional and find the momentum and find that belief and that inner desire to win games when Sheffield Wednesday are right at the bottom, and now I've just etched out of that bottom three, the players and the coach Bully, they just deserve a huge amount of praise because they're just getting on with their jobs, and their jobs are to play football, try and coach the team, try and play better. And they're doing that around, let's be honest, it's been a circus this season in terms of what's going on at the club. And they're doing a great job, not because of the circus, because they've been professionals in their own desire to do so.
Excellent. Yeah, well, I can see it being an optimistic end to the season at both ends of the city, whether Sheffield United go down or not. And just finally, to wind up the show, you're a big pal of Chris Wilder. There's been clearly a bit of politics at Bramall Lane as well, because there was kind of open disagreement between the manager and the board about the January transfer window. I mean, let's hope that gets resolved, because it's important to keep the best football manager at that club, isn't it?
Well, you'd think so. I mean, I thought he gave a really good interview where he said that he'd like to have got a couple of players in. The owner didn't want those players, and he's a man enough to accept that he's not going to get everything that he'd want. He'd probably want to sign Lionel Messi if he could. He knows that's not possible. I just like the way that he is. I think it'd have been very easy for Chris over the last month or so to completely kind of think that nothing's possible, no victories, and what they got 5 out of 7, one in the FA Cup, which was probably the trigger at Bristol. He's a tremendous manager, great guy. And if I was Sheffield United, and particularly that owner, you can't give him everything because he probably wants too much money to buy so many players. But he's certainly a manager that they need to be backing and making sure that he's got the right tools to, let's be honest, it looks like they'll go down, got the right tools to potentially bounce straight back. As many teams do when they go down, they generally do come straight back up. The players are clearly, the majority of them, Premier League standards, so they should be able to have a good dip at coming back up next year. And if Chris Wilder's not the manager, well, I'm afraid the owner's done something drastically wrong.
Yeah, keeping Chris Wilder's hands on the transfer tiller as a modus operandi, I think, is particularly vital in terms of what happens next. Let's hope it all gets resolved. Look, that's been absolutely brilliant hour. I want to thank all my guests, and also thank Sheffield Collegiate for being the inspiration for this show. Thanks to current captain Josh Varley. Thank you to James Gregg and Michael Vaughan, a second appearance on the show. You've really honoured us, and thank you so much. And at home, I hope that you've enjoyed it, and join us again very soon. See you then. Bye-bye.